This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. What would you feel comfortable having in your neighborhood? An orange Julius, a church, mosque, or synagogue, a police station, a pet grooming shop. How about a small home operation for people with mental challenges? How about a sobriety center for people struggling with alcohol and addiction issues? Well, some people are welcoming and others not so. Brenda Plant is the executive director of Turning Point Recovery, which has been operating in our communities here in the Lower Mainland for a good 33 years successfully, and to my knowledge, never once with an untoward incident with a neighbor. And she is currently wrestling with being welcomed by many, many folks up in the North Shore, but wrestling with a few. Hi, Brenda. Great to see you as always.
You too, David.
And let me say up front that, in my opinion, you're one of the great contributors to the culture here in town, and your work is exemplary. So let's just talk before we get into the current controversy. Tell us all about Turning Point. I mean, I know about it, but tell the folks.
Turning Point is sort of a homegrown idea, as it were, 33 years ago. An incredible man by the name of Jim Ross was getting sober in the West End of Vancouver, and he invited some folks that didn't have a safe place to stay, that were also struggling to get sober, to live with him. And before he knew it, his apartment in the West End was overflowing with people in the same situation, and they eventually rented a house on 14th and Alder, and in 1984 acquired, through the generosity of the provincial government at the time and some incredible donors and leaders in our community, the two properties that we have on 13th and Cambie in Vancouver.
Yeah, right behind what for many years has been a landmark white spot, but is currently being torn down for a big apartment development.
There is a development going in next door, so it'll be we'll have a new neighbor, but they're relocating a heritage house from 12th Avenue right beside us, which is fabulous, because it'll be very much in keeping with that whole neighborhood on 13th Avenue.
So at that location, we'll talk about the other locations in a moment, but at that location for a great many years, you've had 22 men, women, and people of other genders in the spectrum.
People,
And you haven't had any problems with your neighbors there?
No, I mean, I've been at Turning Point for 10 years, and certainly in my 10 years, we've had no problems that I know of that have ever been brought to our attention. We've had the odd noise complaint, probably no more so than any other neighbor might have of any other neighbor.
And what do you do there? Who's there? What do you do?
Well, we always reach out to our neighbors, no matter what neighborhood we're in, and work with them. And so if there are people, they usually come, I mean, if people have concerns, they usually just come and knock on our door.
Let's say I come and knock on your door and I'm a new neighbor. What would you show me? What is it that Turning Point does there?
Well, we'd give you a tour of the building, and we'd show you that we're a very structured recovery program. We're supervised 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that we have staff on site at all times, and that our residents are in program, and they're supervised, and they're doing the recovery thing and the program that we operate. What's interesting in Vancouver is a few years ago we did some videotaping, and we actually asked some neighbors what it was like living next to us. And one of the women who was literally across the street from us, and I just adore her, was just totally shocked. She went, "What goes on there? Oh, I thought it was a bed and breakfast." And another person down the street thought it was a youth housing for students at UBC. So most people don't even know what we're doing.
So nobody there is using drugs or alcohol.
We have a zero tolerance.
Totally
Total
zero
zero tolerance.
If somebody suddenly has a packet of white powder hidden in their mattress or something, they're gone.
Yeah, we do room searches and,
Yes.
and room checks every day and room searches every week. And you know, again, it's so important that we keep reiterating the difference between Turning Point and a lot of other organizations or programs is our clients want to be there. So we seldom have we ever had an experience of somebody bringing drugs or alcohol on property because they don't want to be using them.
These are people who are saying, as we would say in Italy, basta, enough, I've had it.
They've had that, you know, Carl Jung talks about that moment of clarity or that epiphany where they go, oh, the aha moment, we like to say, where their life isn't working and it's drugs and alcohol is the common denominator, and they really become willing to do whatever it's going to take to get clean and sober.
And when you talk about program, there's about 14 different things that you do there. I mean, there's a morning meeting, there's therapy, there's 12-step programs. Yes?
Yes, absolutely. And all of the clients is keeping true to our beginnings, help take care of the home. So they have chores. It's part of, all of us have chores at our own homes. And then we have...
So you're not just hanging out.
No.
And you can't be there and not make your bed. And you can't be there and not clean up the dishes.
Correct.
Right.
And you'll take part in cooking, and you may do yoga or go for a walk in the morning or have a morning meditation. And then in mornings, they're in group all morning until lunchtime. And groups in the morning tend to be more process groups. So you talk about your feelings, and you talk about how do you deal with stress and how do you cope with problems. And then they'll have an afternoon group as well. And afternoon groups are more around life skills. So how do you balance a checkbook? How do you open a bank account? How do you apply for a job? How do you work on your resume? Things like that.
A lot of things that a lot of people who aren't using drugs and alcohol take for granted. Skills that just seem to come naturally. But in fact, when you're blowing all your energy on chemicals, these things go by the board.
We've had, you know, we serve everybody on the continuum, from the people that have lost everything and find themselves suddenly without their families or without their homes, to we've had airline pilots and police officers and lawyers and doctors. We've served everybody. And
what is the policy, Brenda, at Turning Point with families? Do parents and or siblings have a visit on weekends if they want? I mean, how do you do that? We have
visiting hours every day, and there are times where there's breaks in programming so that they can see their kids or see their families. We're putting together a family counseling program, a family reunification program right now, where we can supervise some of the counseling around reunifying families. And so, you know, they're so busy in programming that really there's a period in the afternoon where they have time to have outside appointments. In fact, somebody on the North Shore said, well, what are they doing during those afternoon appointments? And I said, probably similar things to you. They might go to the dentist, they might go to the gym, they might go see their kids, or they might go to the dry cleaners. You know, they're just doing regular things like you and I are.
Okay, so that's 13th and Cambie, but for some years now you've had a 9-bed facility for women in Richmond and a 9-bed facility for men in Richmond, two very different addresses.
Yes, so the Richmond Men's House has been open. We've been in Richmond for over 20 years. We've been on Audlin Road for 15 years. We've been on number 2 Road. The Women's House in Richmond opened about 3 years ago. And we also have the new 9-bed Women's House on the North Shore.
Right. So now, you have a very big development, which you've told me about, but I can never quite get my head around it.
Oh, yeah.
What is it? It's like 120.
It's a very exciting, innovative project. It's 129 units of supportive and affordable housing that we're doing in Richmond.
With some other people.
Certainly we're doing it because of the City of Richmond's generosity and support, and we're doing it in partnership with 5 other nonprofits. So Success, Post Mental Health, Pathways Clubhouse, and Tikva are all partners on this project, who all have housing units. You
got Success and Tikva. How can you lose? You got Jews and Chinese. It's aced.
It's pretty amazing.
It's done.
It's really it's been a long process, but we're very close to breaking ground.
That's amazing.
It's really exciting.
And it's all approved, and everybody's on board.
Yeah, we're just finalizing some agreements, and we should be breaking ground soon.
Okay, so now in the North Shore, I had the mixed pleasure of attending 2 events up at the Parkdale Community Center off Mount Seymour Parkway. Very beautiful, sort of almost a sort of fantasy neighborhood because it's so adorable in every way. And the first meeting was not so great because there were 200 people in the hallway, and they had to cancel the meeting because it was violating fire regs, among other things. And there was a bit of hysteria in the room, unfortunately. But the second meeting in the gym, a week or so later, much more civilized, beautifully run, by the way, by the District of North Vancouver. Yeah, so what's all that about? Tell us about that.
Well, we're at very early stages of proposing to do a 9-bed men's house. And I meant to say, in all of our sites, our program is identical to what I described that we do in Vancouver. So it's the same at all of our sites.
Yeah.
In North Van, we have had great success opening the women's house, and an opportunity presented itself where there may be land available that the district owns that we could duplicate or replicate the women program by doing a men's program.
Before you describe what happened, tell us who these men are. If 9 men are moving into a house or a building somewhere in the Parkdale leafy community, who are these guys? Are they murderers? Are they child molesters? Who are they?
Well, that certainly seems to be a concern, and we have very strict admission guidelines at Turning Point. We screen all of our applicants. There's a very arduous referral process that they have to go through. So we do not accept people with violent criminal histories simply because we find that their needs are beyond the scope of what we provide.
Right.
We're not a clinically based program that has therapists doing, really intensive work. And as we know, a lot of people who have hardened criminal past have a lot of issues. And so that's just not the scope of what we do. We're not a halfway house. It's support recovery. Really, our programs are about supporting people, stabilizing folks, and transitioning them back into communities, back to their families. So we don't, it's not to say that we don't get people in our houses that have criminal records, but it's, and especially if it hasn't been screened out, but it's really petty things. It's, DUIs are not uncommon, and all of those behaviors are connected to when they were using drugs. And again, we can't stress enough that our clients want to be there. So we don't take court-mandated people.
If a guy named Jack comes into your program, we just have a minute before we take a little break, Brenda, how long will he stay typically?
3 to 5 months.
Excellent. And you're working always towards helping Jack get back into his world in the community.
Back to school, back to his family.
And he could be anywhere. He could be Maple Ridge, he could be North Van, he could be wherever he is.
Well, the house that we're proposing right now, priority is for North Shore residents, absolutely. So wait
a minute, you're blowing my mind. Do you mean to say there are people in the North Shore who have drug and alcohol problems?
Yes, David, they're everywhere.
Okay, I need to take a break and have a shower. This is unbelievable. Okay. We'll just catch our breath here, folks, while I try to acclimate that new information. Your opportunity to say hi at davidberner.com, send us an email. We're always happy to hear from you. And the opportunity for those lovely folks who support us here on Shaw Community Television Cable 4 to say hello. Back in a moment with Brenda Plant.
This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper.
My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. We don't want anybody to think that this idea for a 9-bed men's facility that Turning Point is working on up in the Parkdale district in North Van is a done deal. It's not at all. It's a proposal, and it has its proponents and its advocates, and it has some people who are not so happy. Am I right? Are we up to date?
You're right up to date. It's very early stages. The community engagement process is actually the very first step in the process. So we've submitted a business case and a plan to the district.
Yes.
And it went to council, and the very first order of business is to engage the community and dialogue around the proposal.
So there are some people, I'm sure, who will come to a community engagement process who just assume this is PR fluff, that it's just, we're just placating the plebes by giving them a chance to vocalize. But you're saying, in fact, that's not the case.
No, we're a long ways
very,
from that.
It's a very open, serious discussion.
It is, and we haven't even applied for rezoning. We haven't applied for development permits. This is literally the very first step, and we want to hear from the neighbors, and we want to address concerns because, as you know, a lot of those concerns are unfounded, and a lot of fear-mongering goes on, and there's a lot of myths about the work that happens in support recovery homes, and so. But
fear is a key word, Brenda, because it's understandable, and I know that you're an empathetic person, and it's understandable that people who don't understand these kinds of places and these kinds of issues would have a natural, whoa, what's this? What the heck is this? Right?
Well, for years, anytime Turning Point's ever tried to open a new site or goes to open a new site, there's always resistance.
Richmond took you quite a bit of work with the men's facility.
And also with the women's site. And of course,
I didn't know
the key ingredient in all of this is for people to understand that all of those things are unfounded. Within weeks, months of opening, all those people that were opposed go, oh, it really isn't what I thought it was going to be, and it really is okay. So we actually have people that were concerned about the North Shore Women's House that are now working alongside us. The church is doing, helping us do vegetable gardens, and we're working with the neighbors because we form neighborhood advisory committees, and we are working with the neighbors to address some of the issues around lighting and traffic calming on the street. And I mean, we're a very good neighbor.
Let's first tell some good stories. When I was there the other night, and I didn't stay for the whole evening, but I heard at least half a dozen presentations from people in the audience, several of which were tear-inducing. I mean, they were so touching and sweet, people talking about addictions affecting their own families or themselves and outing themselves as people in long-time recovery, and it was very beautiful to hear people say, look, this is a real issue and it's in our midst, and we have to do something about it.
Well, that's certainly why I get up and come to work every morning, is that you love to hear those stories, and that's what we do at Turning Point is really we make recovery a reality.
Would you please assure the people of Parkdale that you didn't invite those folks? They weren't shills in the audience.
No, in fact, we were really clear that we were not stacking the audience. We had no idea who to expect. We knew that I had 4 or 5 staff that were there, that none of them spoke. They were sitting in the back. But other than that, we wanted it to be as transparent a process as possible, and we've done nothing. We have not started petitions. We haven't done any of that. We're letting the community speak as the community is rightfully entitled to do.
It was interesting that the woman who was literally shrieking at the first event, which it turned out wasn't a meeting, but shrieking hysterically, "We can't sleep in our beds." She wasn't there, was she?
No, she was. She spoke.
Oh, did she?
Yeah.
Okay. And how did she do? Was she a little calmer?
She had a couple questions. And
fair enough. Questions are fine, but screaming, "We can't sleep in our beds," is a little over the top.
Yeah, no, I've heard there's some. And in fact, I spoke to a woman who said she hasn't been able to sleep since this started. And I said, really one of the fastest ways to put your mind at ease is come to one of our sites. Come to Turning Point, have a tour, have a visit, meet our residents. And if they don't do that, and they're just relying on dare I say, the fear-mongering that's going on, well, of course they're going to be in fear. If you have people that are telling you that there's murderers coming to your neighborhood, or that they have some preconceived notion that people in recovery are child abusers, I'd be afraid too.
What's one of the most famous quotes ever is, "Nature abhors a vacuum." And when there's a vacuum of information, when we don't know who our daughters are dating, we assume that he's Jack the Ripper, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
just
no,
natural.
exactly.
We always fill in, and we often fill in with garbage.
Well, and unfortunately, what's happening is we are putting a lot of information out there on our website. The district has it on their website.
Yes.
But every time you put new information out, they try and find holes in it. So, it begs new questions and new areas to try and go down. And it's the only way for people to believe what we're doing
Yes.
and understand what we're doing is come talk to our clients, our current
Brenda,
clients.
on that site, are you talking about taking over an old house like you've had at 13th and Cambie for years?
No,
Are you
we're
talking
gonna
about a
be
new building?
Yeah.
Wow. So it's a purpose-built building.
Yes, and exactly like the Women's House. It'll be very similar in design, and BC Housing is going to own it. They'll be leasing the land from the district, and we are the operator.
Fantastic. Now, let me tell you what I thought was the worst comment of the night that I heard, and I won't identify this person even by his specific occupation. Let me only say that this is a healthcare professional who allegedly has spent his entire life helping people. And he was almost inarticulate, didn't know how to use the microphone, but on top of all of that, his punchline was, it'll bring down property values. It turns out that this healthcare professional is all about money. Well, let me tell you that in 1969, when we faced, I was building something, and we faced a similar thing at Vancouver City Hall, the late, great Harry Rankin stood up in council and said, if those people can bring down runaway property values, that was 1969,
right.
What would Harry do if he were alive today? If they can bring down property values, they should be given the key to the city.
Well, I just, interestingly enough, got an email this morning that
Yes.
a property on Browning, which is a side street to where we're proposing, has sold for, I believe they said above market, or for the asking price, sold in 12 days.
Yes.
So they're not too concerned. And all of the houses that have sold around us on 13th or number 2 Road or Odland Road have all gone for above market.
What is your adjacency to neighbors with this new proposal, this building you're going to build, if it happens? Where will you have neighbors right beside you?
We have one neighbor that is on the same lot of land that we are. There's some houses across the street, and then there's a larger, I believe it's a family townhouse complex across the street.
Yeah. Okay. How did you survive all of that? Did you walk away from that last meeting?
The other night?
Yeah, feeling like, oh my God, this is just a bit much.
I felt very positive, actually.
Yes.
We found it to be a very positive meeting. I'm glad that people that have concerns are asking the right questions and asking important questions.
Yeah.
I hope they're listening to the answers.
Yeah.
I hope the answers just aren't sort of being glazed over so that they can focus on, well, okay, well then it's this, or that's the problem, and we're very optimistic. It's incredible to see the outpouring of support. Turning Point prides itself on being a grassroots organization. We're not a big, thriving, we're not trying to have a monopoly on this. We only go to communities where we're asked, where there's a demonstrated need, where no one else is doing the work, and because we believe in what we do, and we believe we do it really well.
And you do.
We want to work with people. We're not trying to shove things down people's throats. And I think when people have a better understanding of who we are and what our business practices are, I mean, we're one of only a few licensed providers, which means we have a whole host of regulations and standards we have to meet.
Yes.
I think they'd be impressed.
Yeah. I have a general rule of thumb about these places, which you may not agree with. I mean, you and I are friends, but we don't always agree on everything. But my rule of thumb, and I say this publicly, is if it's run by a government, don't let it in your neighborhood. In general, I'm not so trusting of government-run operations. But when I see a program run by community-based people, nonprofit agencies, or for-profit clinics as well, but people who did this because they had a need to do it and they know their game, then I'm a big fan.
Well, we know what the statistics are. One in 10 Canadians will have a mental health or addiction issue. 1 in 5 will have an experience of it in their lifetime. So those are pretty, to say, as some people are claiming, that there's no problem on the North Shore is naive. We know it's on the North Shore. I just met with someone yesterday who said he lives in the neighborhood. He's got a neighbor 2 doors down and another one right next door where both parents are alcoholics. And he's watching what's happening to those children who, daddy's not home because daddy's in the bar. are, and
Yep.
you know,
We
but
used
when
to-
you're in fear, you don't want to see that, right?
Yeah,
when you're
yeah.
terrified because people are telling you to be terrified,
Yes.
then understandably you're not going to see those people.
If you had 1 minute, and that's about what we've got, to speak to the citizens of North Vancouver who are concerned, what's your punchline? What would you say?
Keep an open mind. Come to Turning Point, see what we do, talk to our residents, look at our track record, and
Visit the Women's Center.
visit the Women's Center, visit any of our
Yeah.
sites.
Drop in.
Yeah,
Have a cup of coffee.
we had people that were not sure about the Women's Center that came to the the Vancouver sites
Yeah.
and changed their mind in 15 minutes
Of
after
course.
they saw what we did and met who we work with.
Yeah. Do you have an ETA? Do you have
We're just in the process right now of waiting to hear I guess it'll go to City Council or District Council again for
Yeah.
discussion about next step for us would be to submit the rezoning application, but we're still not there yet.
Yeah, well, I love the way you handle yourself and handle these issues, Brenda. You're a much more reasonable person than I've ever been. And that's one of the reasons I'm not in the business anymore.
You have to keep an open mind.
Yeah, I would just fight with people. Thanks so much
Thanks,
for being
David.
here. It's great to see you, as always.
too. Thank you.
And best of luck. I
Thanks.
know you'll do well with Turning Point. All right, folks, next week, it's taken me 72 years, but finally someone's going to teach me about sex. Salima Moon is a sex educator, and finally someone explains to me what this is and how it works. I don't know how I'll survive the week waiting. Thanks for being with us here on Shaw Community Television Cable 4. Good night.